Welcome to the Women Leaders Association podcast, where we believe we go further, faster, and have more fun when we go together. Be sure to tune in each week to hear an empowering message from the world's top women executives, trailblazers, entrepreneurs, and all-around fierce female leaders. I'm your host, Julianne Kirkland, and I will be taking you on a deep dive of each message to equip you with the principles, strategies, and tools you need to start crushing your goals, increasing your impact, creating work-life harmony, and did I mention have more fun? Because when you love what you do it better. The Women Leaders Association is the world's largest women executives association with over 30,000 women in executive and leadership positions who are committed to the development and advancement of women in the corporate arena. If you would like to get involved in a Women Leaders Association chapter, would enjoy daily podcasts, or you desire to become a part of the Women's Mastermind group near you, simply go to womenleaderspodcast.com. Now let's tune in for this incredible message. Hey, welcome back to the Women Leaders Podcast. I am so excited that Jessica is with us today. Now, I have to have full disclosure because y'all know how I am. I am up and honest and just here we are, right? So it has taken us four times, people, to record this podcast. Jessica has shown me so much grace. And so thank you, Jessica. And it just goes to show your heart for philanthropy. I was telling her that word is so hard for me to say, so I might stumble a few times on it. But that's what we're here to talk about. And you have a new book out. It's a children's book, right? And it's
Correct, yeah.
Philanthropy Means Love. So, all right, let's start from the beginning. How did you get involved in this, in the nonprofit space? Like, what was that? Ooh, this is what I want to do. What was that moment?
Yeah, well, I'm just so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm such a big fan of the Women's Leaders podcast. And so I just really appreciate you taking time to chat in our busy schedules. And so I'm so excited for today to spend the afternoon with you. So how did I get into fundraising and nonprofit work? So I grew up in Winchester, Massachusetts, just outside of Boston. And I, was really involved in service and sort of mission-oriented groups all growing up. And that really drew me to attend Boston College. Boston College is a Jesuit Catholic institution where I actually currently work now. And their mission is really, men and women for others. And it just really resonated with me and my inclination towards service work and volunteering and sort of the nonprofit space. And so when I came to Boston College, I got involved in a variety of national and international service organizations. I was able to travel to Jamaica and Exmoor, Virginia, and I did, work with homeless shelters and different things in the Boston area. And I really just kind of have a heart for this type of work. But when I went to graduate from Boston College, I really didn't know what working in the nonprofit sector could look like or how my skills might contribute to these organizations. So I was a little stuck. But I had interned. I kind of grew up in the hospitality world. My parents both work for a hotel in Boston. And so I had an internship at a different hotel in Boston. And my manager there was working at the time at Partners in Health. She had kind of left the hotel industry and was working at Partners in Health, which is a big global health nonprofit in Boston. And she suggested that I apply for a role there as a development assistant. And so I said, sure, that sounds great. Let's give that a shot. And that was really my first entry into the nonprofit space. I, was on the fundraising team, kind of supporting our frontline gift officers, and I would help them with briefings, and I would, help them with expense reports and prep them for meetings and do meeting follow-up, things like that when they would meet with donors. And truly to this day, working at Partners in Health was one of my favorite jobs I've ever had. It was just such an incredibly formative experience for me. I had such unique experiences while I was there to kind of grow within the organization and, do like impact report writing. I helped organize and execute their first large fundraising gala. And it was also right when the movie or the documentary about Partners in Health came out called Bending the Arc, which is still on Netflix now. And I was able to do a national screening tour of the documentary with, the organization leaders and the founders, which is just, it was just such a unique
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for those who are listening and aren't very keen on, the ins and outs of nonprofit work, what has been um a learning block that you have overcome? What has been something that you were like, oh, I had no idea that this was a thing until like what are some of those moments? Let's get real.
Yeah, it's such a good question. Working in nonprofits is really unique. I mean, it really is unique. I also think that I think what I learned is they're much more similar to businesses and sort of corporate worlds than I would have expected. I think really like a well-run nonprofit really does run like a business. I mean, we, especially on the fundraising side, right? We're on the revenue generating side of the organization. And so when we think about nonprofits, we absolutely think about, mission driven work and how are we making an impact in the communities that we're aiming to serve. And that is all really important. I think it's, for me, it's thinking through being on the fundraising side, like how are we really treating our donors like a business would their clients and sort of helping them see themselves as partners in the mission. I also think it's been really fun to be on the fundraising side and sort of it's much more intimate than I would have expected when I sort of made the transition ultimately from like back end events and report writing to being a frontline fundraiser and working directly with donors. I didn't realize how intimate of a role that is, right? I mean, we have the unique privilege of meeting one-on-one with individuals, really hearing intimate parts of their stories and their lives and their financial situation, learning what they care about and sort of making those strategic alignments between what is beneficial at the organization and what the donor cares about and helping them make an impact that's meaningful for them. So I don't think I anticipated both sort of the corporate business alignments, but also how intimate it is and maybe that being different from the corporate sector.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so important what this conversation is leading into, because I think so often I've worked with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs, and so often we hear these like hustle and grind in whatever the corporate, I'm air quoting if you're not watching us, but there's like corporate environment, right? This hustle grind mentality of things, and they're not where they want to be, right? So then something happens or they get inspired by something, they have a passion, right? So they're like, ooh, I'm going to go start a nonprofit. And what you're saying is, there are parts of it that are very similar to running a business.
Mm-hmm.
You still have to have systems in play. Mm-hmm. You still have to have conversations. You still, right? You like, there are those anchoring points, those foundational skills that we have to have no matter what avenue that we go into, right? If we want to communicate clearly, make an impact, like there are foundational skills that we all have to have. And, I love that you're saying that really getting in with the donors, because again, you also hear these people, I've been approached before by nonprofits that the first thing out of their mouth is, well, you get a tax deduction.
Right.
Instead of like, wait, it's like, talk to me about the story, like bring me in, Totally. And so I love that y'all are aware of that and you're advancing that knowledge, because that does need to happen. It's not just it's a tax write-off.
Totally. Totally. Yes. That's a shame that that's happened. Yeah. I mean, I think you touched on a couple interesting points, I would say, and this could be somewhat controversial, or maybe people have different opinions on this, but I think the first point you raise of, the idea of going out and starting a million different nonprofits, it is challenging, right? I mean, I think that ultimately there are so many different nonprofits out there and so many different schools and so many great organizations and missions to support. I think what I would love to see is, rather than people saying, I see this really niche need, I'm going to start my own nonprofit, is more this movement towards joining existing nonprofits or helping expand existing nonprofits. I think it's just, there's a lot of great organizations that already exist. And so how do we sort of bolster and build those up? so that we can direct more funding streams right to larger, sort of more just kind of bigger groups, honestly, that are doing kind of more wide-ranging work than constantly sort of starting our own.
Yeah.
And so the second piece, about, yeah, I mean, I think you're totally right. I think some people, of course, resonate to an extent with, the tax advantageous ways to make a gift. But I think that comes way later. I mean, I think
Right.
ultimately what we're doing is really, like I said, and like you said, right? Hearing people's stories, learning their stories. This is such a personal thing when people, support causes and missions that they may never touch, right? It's ultimately really cool to work with donors, whether it's Partners in Health or Boston College, where I am now. They may never meet the students that they're supporting or the programs that they're supporting. And so it is a really, it's an act, kind of leading into my book, it really is an act of love. And so how do we learn people's backgrounds and sort of the inspiration behind what they're doing? Because that is so much more powerful for why they're giving and to, inspire larger and more frequent gifts than the tax write-off.
Right, exactly, exactly. And it's so true. I'm grateful when people do have the heart and the passion to go out and start something new, right? But to your point, if truly your goal is to make the greatest impact possible in this mission, right? Then again, let's look around. If there's not anybody doing it, cool, start your own, you know.
Totally.
However, if there is there any way that you can be involved in that as well? Even just to really get in and learn how it operates and what's been successful, and ooh, this could change and this could actually be more successful, and just all the ins and outs of it before you jump into trying to start it on your own, because it is a daunting task. It is a
Mhm.
lot to take on yourself when you're just getting started. So to get in with a company that is already doing it and doing it well is really important.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's well said.
Yeah. So, all right. How did you get into writing this book for children?
Yes. So when I was so I've always kind of had an interest in writing a children's book. I originally went to Boston College thinking that I wanted to be a teacher. I've always had an interest in education and, early childhood development, but I never was really sure what I would write about, or I didn't have a great idea for a book. And then when I was working at the University of Colorado in Boulder on their fundraising team, we had a consultant come in who did, a day-long training. And that was the first time that I learned that the word philanthropy comes from the word love, which really stuck with me and was a really nice reframe of, so often when I tell people what I do, they say, that sounds horrible. Like I could never ask for money all day long. What are you doing? And, it makes me think a couple of things, honestly, when people say that. One is I have incredible job security because apparently nobody wants to do this job. So I will have this job forever. But also, I just think people really don't get what philanthropy is. And so that really stuck with me of, maybe that's an idea for a children's book. Like, how do we share more about what philanthropy is? And originally the idea kind of came from the perspective of like, okay, how do I describe what fundraising is and get more people into this field? And so, so many fundraisers will say, I just kind of fell into this field. And that was the original idea for the book, which maybe will be a sequel one day. But ultimately, this idea that, philanthropy means love, and what the book turns out to be is a book that teaches kids what the word philanthropy is. And it also showcases the idea that, you can make an impact even if you don't think you're giving a lot or enough. So the book kind of follows the main character as she says, there's so many causes that I care about, animals and people and the environment, but I only have $20. Like, what do I do? And so it introduces kids to this idea of collective impact and saying, okay, well, if we all give $20, we really can have this collective communal impact. So I just kind of wrote it one day, really as a cathartic experience for
Yeah.
myself and just kind of a fun experience to, do something creative, a little bit different from what I normally do. And I said, okay, great. I wrote it and I don't need to do anything else from here. I didn't really have any big aspirations of publishing it or doing anything like that. But then last summer, I was on vacation with my parents and my sister and my husband for my dad's 70th birthday. And I read it to them and they said, this is kind of good. Maybe you should think about putting this out into the world in some capacity. And so I started listening to podcasts on self-publishing and said, I think I can do this. And so, yeah, there's a kind of a variety of steps from writing to publication, but it was a really fun process and it's really fun to see it in print and in people's hands.
I love that. So let's go back to, as you're talking about the main character saying, I only have $20, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there's adults that are in that same boat.
Totally.
Right,
Right.
especially now in today's world.
Yeah.
So what do you say to that person? Let's play this out. So there's a listener listening right now who's going, that's exactly where I'm at. Like, I know I have this $20 that I desire to give. I don't know how, I don't know where, I don't know when, I don't know who to contact. How does she
Mhm.
now decide, one, where to go, what to do, all of those things?
It's such a good question. And you're right. I mean, the the number one response I get when I meet one-on-one with donors is, I will never be your biggest donor. I will never be the donor that names a building. To which I say, you're right. Like, most of us are not going to have that level of impacts and that level of accumulated wealth. And that's totally fine. That's not the majority of donors to organizations. And so I think, when sort of discerning to your question, how you go about, I want to make a gift and how do I do that? I do think it's a lot of reflection on, okay, where do I want to start, right? There's hospitals and education and community organizations, sort of really thinking through reflectively, like, which of those do I want to start with? Which of those missions really speaks to me from a personal, experience that I've had, or it touches my kid's life, or it touches, a cause that I'm really passionate about. And honestly, just kind of do a little Google search of like what organizations might be in your area or more nationally that do that type of work. Um, and you often can just give directly online, but you can also reach out to the organization and they have contact people like me, right, who will sit down and meet with you one-on-one and say, okay, great, you're interested in, for example, supporting Boston College or your alma mater. Well, the people who work at Boston College in the advancement office or in the development office, similarly at any other organization, will really be able to sit down with you and say, okay, within this big umbrella, what is it that is exciting to you, right? Is it financial aid? Is it academic research to advance causes and programs that you really care about? Is it that you went to your college and you were really involved in XYZ student organization and you want to make sure that that continues to grow? And so you can kind of work with individual fundraisers to really boil that down, which is sort of the area component of our work. There's also all the technical ways to give, right? So often we work with donors, for people, for your audience listening right now, who are just thinking about cash. What we do too is we help people think through, okay, yes, cash is a great way, of course, to make a gift, but you can also do things like leave an organization in your will, or, go to your IRA account for your company and leave a percentage of your IRA account to an organization, or give appreciated stock. Like, there's so many sort of, to your original point, tax advantageous ways to make an impact. So once you kind of figure out the area and the organization that most speaks to you, there's lots of ways to maybe even have a bigger impact than you would have thought possible originally.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. Oh, Jessica, this has been so great. So what is like that one last piece of advice that you would give to the woman now who's going, okay, all right, so I kind of now know that, all right, I need to ask myself, what am I passionate about? What really is kind of like pulling me towards this direction? What do I want to see prosper in these different areas? And she's able to kind of go through those questions. What advice would you give to her of maybe wanting to get into this work herself?
Mm.
Like, what would
In
be her
terms of
next step?
being a fundraiser or working at a nonprofit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a great question. I mean, I think sort of what we were talking about at the beginning when we, are encouraging people to maybe not go out and immediately just start their own nonprofit. I also think, the best way to support the causes we care about is really being a donor or working at the organization. There's plenty of volunteer opportunities, which are also really important, but I almost think the biggest ways you're going to make an impact are as an employee or as a donor. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I would love more people to get into the nonprofit sector and, support the causes they care about and sort of advance whatever missions they're looking at. And there's a variety of jobs. I mean, truly, like we were talking about at the beginning, they really operate like businesses. So while there's, of course, fundraising departments like I'm in, more programmatic departments, whatever that looks like at the organization, whether it's, faculty members, right, at a school or at a nonprofit, maybe it's more healthcare clinicians, et cetera. There's also so many jobs in between. HR, finance, like anything you would think of at a regular company that exists in the nonprofit sector too. And so I think my biggest piece of advice is we all have skills, and sort of reflecting on what our skills and experiences are and how those can best translate into some role at a nonprofit. I just think there's room for everybody. And so if there's any interest in that space, I would say just go for it and start networking and exploring, and you never know where that could lead.
I love it. I love it. This is so good. All right, Jessica, how can people that are listening connect with you? Where do you hang out on?
Sure. So on LinkedIn, I'm Jessica Carbone. And that's probably the best way. I'm always kind of on there and connecting with people. And so I would love to connect further.
Awesome. Wonderful. Jessica, thank you so much for your time and for sharing this important message. We so appreciate it. Listen, ladies, if you are looking for more messages just like this, be sure to tune in to the womenleaderspodcast.com. Bye for now.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.